Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the national anthem.
Sri Lanka. an economy in a meltdown. Sri Lanka, a country of 22 million people, once referred to as a tropical island paradise, is in free fall.
This certainly is the worst economic crisis we have faced during this century and last century.
It's going to be a long-lasting, drawn-out crisis, and we really have to prepare for that.
Sri Lanka has defaulted on all foreign debts. Its access to international financial markets has been cut off. The rupee's gone into a tailspin, and there's spiraling inflation. Cities and towns are submerged in darkness for hours with no fuel to produce electricity. Cooking gas, medicine, milk powder and other essential commodities are short in supply.
එදිනෙදා ඇත්තටම ජීවත් වෙන්න බෑද? එක වේලක් කෑවොත් ඊළඟ වේල කොහොමද කන්නේ කියලා අපි කල්පනා කරන්නේ.
Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and his entire cabinet have resigned. Veteran politician Ranil Wickremesinghe has just taken over as the new Prime Minister. Can he steer the country's sinking ship to safer shores? How could a nation slide into disaster and chaos so fast? Bankruptcy, an economy in a meltdown. Sri Lanka, a country of 22 million people, once referred to as a tropical island paradise, is in free fall.
This certainly is the worst economic crisis we have faced during this century and last century.
It's going to be a long-lasting, drawn-out crisis, and we really have to prepare for that.
Sri Lanka has defaulted on all foreign debts. Its access to international financial markets has been cut off. The rupee's gone into a tailspin, and there's spiraling inflation. Cities and towns are submerged in darkness for hours with no fuel to produce electricity. Cooking gas, medicine, milk powder and other essential commodities are short in supply.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you did see a bit of the repeat, that was because we wanted to reiterate the problems that Sri Lanka is having. It is what has been consuming every single Sri Lankan here and abroad, not to mention others around the world. Sri Lanka's unprecedented economic crisis, precipitated by a political one. The twin crises has taken its toll, brought the country down to its knees and literally pushed the country to the brink of disaster. What we feel immediately is the shortage of gas, of fuel, of pharmaceuticals, of food. But the bigger picture is that the country is in almost insurmountable debt, with no money to service debts, no money to import any essentials, and no funds to even have the basic daily operations moving. Inflation is beyond comprehension at nearly 40% year on year by end of May, and food inflation at 54%. Rating agencies have brought our credit to rock bottom, and Sri Lanka is now relying on not just for an IMF bailout, which won't be quite in the immediate, but other funding agencies to give us bridge financing just for basic survival. But then we have a constitutional crisis as well. Widespread protests, now coming into its 60th day, have been calling for the resignation of the president. It has also been calling for the abolition of the 20th Amendment and sweeping new clauses to be brought into the 21st Amendment that is currently in abeyance. The appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe, our guest speaker here today as Prime Minister on the 12th of May, started the process of resolving some of the deep-rooted issues, but it is the fundamentals that need to be focused on. So, The purpose today is to look at some of the pressing issues and bring together the professional community, each and every one of you, to help put the country back on track. The two entities bringing together this collective of professionals today are Rakimu Jayatu Lanka and the Association of Constructive Professionals. Our guest speaker today, the Prime Minister, will initially give us his action plan and the roadmap to tackle the twin crises, and then we will open the floor to questions which will be written and sent in to us. But first, to welcome you all this evening, may I invite the chairman of Rakimu Jayatu Lanka, Hiran De Silva.
Honorable Ranil Wickremesinghe, Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, members of the diplomatic missions, members of the medical community, the legal community, senior members of the public service, engineers, architects, the media personnel, members of other professional bodies, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, everybody. Let me introduce myself briefly. I'm Hiran De Silva, a marine engineer who represents a cross-section of professionals in the form of Rakimu Jayatu Lanka and the Association of Constructive Professionals. We step forward to assemble in this forum to seek solutions to this unprecedented twin crisis of political uncertainty and the imminent economic collapse of this country. We have met twice before, of course with limited membership, and today we are gathered here with more than 500 participants, and actually I think it is more than 500, it's about 700. It would be unnecessary to dwell upon the background that has caused this crisis. As professionals, we all understand what is going on. The present crisis, as you know, is twofold. One being the political crisis of having no true leadership to run the affairs of the state efficiently at the apex. The second is the economic crisis that even the upper middle class is hit with, judging by the appearance of the people on the streets. The economic crisis has hit everybody like a sledgehammer, crippling the life as we knew it. Ladies and gentlemen, the lower strata of the earnings level are driven to the wall, and that strata represents nearly 40% out of the 70% of the rural population. They probably did not know what hit them, very unfortunately. The indirect taxes on essentials have kept them below or near the poverty line for a long time, and now they have been pushed into the deep end without a life jacket of any sort. The business community is reeling with a situation where the necessary input for the industry to generate any useful output is throttled because of the lack of forex. Now, if we get to elementary economics, any drop in demand would trigger a drop in supply too, where the general price level would move indirectly to either. When a situation has developed where the demand for dollars is curtailed, it is natural that the supply too falls. This may sound counterintuitive, but the truth remains that the country needs to attract dollars. We should either increase net exports or create a situation where dollars will find a way to fill the gap of the supply and demand. Dollars will flow if we create a demand. It is, what I say is actually against what the CBSL says, but think, all are professionals, you can think for yourself. However, the curb market for dollars seems to be not short of any dollars at all. That's just a tip. We feel the need to find a way to turn this availability of dollars into the mainstream economy. To purchase the dollars with so much of money printed recently. That is where the financial engineering and innovation comes in, not just textbook, finance, or economics. This is the time for the finance professionals to make their presence felt. I'm sure this body of professionals will have many actionable strategies to address these issues in a sustainable way. That is the prime reason we have set up these two organizations. I invite all of you to come up with your concrete proposals. We have distributed a piece of paper. You can just write it and put it into the suggestions box so that we will get these proposals and we will try to lobby the government so that we will have a win-win situation at the end of the day. We opine that the central bank and the government can only do so much while the professionals take a back seat and enjoy their professional lives. We feel that we too have a responsibility to come up with a solution. History has taught us that a time of crisis creates the perfect backdrop for change and for the people to get hurt by the political ears. Ladies and gentlemen, that opportunity is upon us now. We have to make the best out of this bad situation. As we experience today, less said about the crime against the farming community and agriculture in general, the better. The scarcity of fuel and electricity on demand to run the engine of economy has been experiencing a severe drawback. And as everybody knows here, no engine, including a body, economy, anything in nature, does not work without energy. So energy and agriculture, we hope the government, Mr. Wickramasinghe, would pay utmost attention to these two avenues. It could easily be argued that these two factors, agriculture and energy, are all encompassing. Every problem we see under the sun is in here. And all the political problems we see are actually manifestations of bad economics at the end of the day. Now, everybody reading newspapers, looking at international reports, listening to one-to-one interviews, we all understand that the IMF and the international donors, Paris Club, are waiting for Sri Lanka to have a stable government. So stable governments does not fall out of the sky. We as people must push, lobby, show to our leaders that we are behind them. And that is what we see today. Sir, people are behind you. We need you to address these issues. We see some actions taken by the central bank in the monetary policy adjustments. And now we see, since yesterday, or day before yesterday, we see fiscal policy actions are also gradually coming in. So we will expect some form of mitigation in the inflation levels. But as people, we are not still sure whether the central bank has done everything possible or everything correctly. That remains to be seen. Now, on top of all these, the faulty foreign policy sensitivities in the past few months has upset practically all the international donors, all the major superpowers. The USA, Eurozone, UK, Japan, and all these people are antagonized at the same time by the former government. And this, I think, must be a world record anywhere. We hope, sir, that your government would swiftly reset this adverse situation. in this backdrop, we would have a fighting chance as concerned citizens need to back a person who is actually capable of doing this. This is a matter of complex financial policy, monetary policy, the economic issues, diplomatic issues, all has to happen simultaneously. That is to bail out this country from the current crisis. As a large part of this solution, this organization sees that we need a mandatory realignment of global diplomatic approach. And anybody here will have no doubt as to who that person would be. There is one person in the current political landscape who understands all this international diplomacy and the hard technical know-how needed at the level it is required to uplift this country, which started to sink in this twin crisis mostly due to self-inflicted wounds by the former dysfunctional, malformed government. Sir, in this background, the best prospect we have out of this current lot to get the job done is here today. However, at the time we initially organized this event, this particular gentleman was only a lone MP. The invitation card in your hands will attest to that. By the time we have this event today, I'm happy to say he's the Prime Minister. And we intend to have a bigger event in the near future with more members and more ideas and more proposals. And it is highly likely, and I hope, if the country is lucky, we will see him as the president. Ladies and gentlemen, I consider myself privileged and honored to have the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister here, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, to share with us his thoughts, analysis, his troubleshooting, and most importantly, his roadmap to show us how he proposes to steer us out of this mess. I welcome all these professionals, members, friends here to act together to serve the country. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, with that short introduction, may I please invite to the podium our guest speaker today, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Chairman and members of the Association of Constructive Professionals and friends. I've been asked to address you on Sri Lanka's twin crises. One has already started, economic crisis in Sri Lanka. I need not go back to the past as to how we deprived ourselves of our foreign exchange, how we decided that we go to it alone, and how the facts were concealed not only from the people but from Parliament and from the members of the then government. The second, and stemming from it, is also a political crisis, a reflection of the loss of confidence in a political system which allowed the country to go down to this level. So this is what we are grappling with. There is the second crisis. The second crisis is the global impact of the Ukraine crisis. We are only seeing the beginning of it, the increase in fuel. It will get much worse as it goes along. As it goes along, you will find most probably be a shortage of food. The food shortage will go globally till 2024. After all, Russia and Ukraine are the largest, one is the largest producer of grain, other is the fifth largest. You cannot export the Russian grain, and Ukraine, whatever is left, cannot be sent out. Their ports are closed by the Russians, and their rail track gauge is different from that of Poland. So each carriage has to be lifted and put onto the Polish track. You can't send food out that way. And many of their fields of the agriculture area are destroyed. Even if the war stops tomorrow, it will take Ukraine at least 3 years to get its cultivation back on track. Then the rising price of fuel, the rising price of corn, again the shortage of fertilizers. So how does it hit? It hits the whole world. There's a shortage of fertilizer in California. There's a shortage of fertilizer in Brazil. How do you meet it? And there's going to be a shortage of food. Already countries are banning the export of food. That's the second one you have, that you are facing. So what is going to happen? No, we are not going to add the Ukraine crisis to the Sri Lanka crisis. That is not the impact. The impact is going to be the Sri Lankan crisis multiplied by the Ukraine crisis. So this is only the beginning. And just for the shortage of dollars and rupees, we have already shaken the political system. I came today from a meeting of the political party leaders in Parliament, and they've arrived at a consensus on how the new amendment should be brought in, and should an amendment that will avoid any provision which will require referendum. But will that do? As this crisis gets worse, there are going to be many countries affected by the Ukraine crisis. Some say 40, some say 70. But we are unique. They are only getting affected with until the Ukraine crisis took place, and the impact came, their economies were normal. Not in our case. We have already started suffering. So where do we go from here? We didn't go early enough to the IMF. Take the case of Zambia. They went early, but it got delayed because the Chinese and the others could not agree. Now they've come to an agreement, it has to go, staff agreement, it has to go. to the IMF board to be finalized. But in the meantime, because of the Ukrainian crisis, the price of copper has gone up. So they can manage with what they are getting now until they get until you get the assistance from IMF. Ours is different. We are losing our sources of foreign exchange. So this is what we are faced with. And as I said, this is only the beginning. At the moment, there are no queues for petrol. What you don't understand is that I have to do the job not only of the Prime Minister but a firefighter. Every morning, from where can you find $20 million, $30 million, $40 million to pay for a ship? If we miss one, then there will be a shortage that day. You can't carry on a government like this. The problem we face now is so bad that what will happen when the Ukraine crisis comes on is another story. We have run down our economy. We have state enterprises owning trillions and trillions of rupees to the banks. We have enterprises that are losing. We have projects which will not benefit Sri Lanka. There are no priority lists. Even till recently, different agencies were actually using the different credit lines to order what they wanted. There was no priority. If someone said, I want fertilizer, that was there. If someone said, I want petrol, fuel, it was there. We had to establish a priority order and sort of centralize the distribution, the access to the foreign credit lines. So this is just a start of what we have to do. The worst is still to come. As you know, we may not have food. Our food supplies are enough until about September, October. Because we didn't have enough fertilizer either for Maha or for Yala. Now we are trying to get fertilizer for the next Maha season. If we do, then we will certainly be self-sufficient by February next year. What do you do in between? As the economy fails, more and more jobs are being lost. More and more enterprises, big and small, are collapsing. This is what we are going for. Time will come when people may not eat 3 meals a day. If they survive, they may need 2 meals. That situation will come for some of our people. We have to avoid hunger. Is there an end to it? Well, we are talking with our other nations, the friendly nations, to get help. There is light at the end of the tunnel. But to ensure there are no earth slips while we go through the tunnel. That's the problem. We cannot get through this year by ourselves. We need a few $1 billion to come from outside. Otherwise this country cannot survive. We need to get that money. We have to reach out again to the people we rejected. To the Japanese, who have been our friends from the 1952 to today, who are hurt by what happened. Which country rejects $3 billion worth of aid without a thank you, without even having a negotiation? Just say we don't want it. then how do you bring back confidence with those people? We are lucky that India has come forward to help us at the hour of our need. Other countries are chipping in. China has come with assistance, but someone in the government went and negotiated a loan, the swap, which we cannot use. We have to look at Europe and the West, but unfortunately the West are also holding. China also has a problem of its COVID and the downturn in the economy. The West is having a problem. One is the inflation that is raging there. The price of fuel has gone up. And secondly, they are putting their money into Ukraine. Over $100 billion have gone into Ukraine. 100 billion less for the rest of the world. So it is essential that we get help from our friends and make up with them. If the fault is ours, we should apologize. If the fault is theirs, tell them it's your fault. You can't have friend relations with countries and then throw them aside. Some official decides we don't want it, however high he is, and that's the end of it. What is the end result? We are starving. Whenever we had a problem earlier, it was Japan who bailed us out. I remember during the Kuwait war, when all our people had to return from the Gulf, and President Premadasa sent me to Japan to meet Prime Minister Kaifu. He took the letter, he put it on a side, said, yes, I'll ask my people to study it. And then before I went, I was told, there's $600 million for you. $600 million in 1990 is a big thing. That is how we worked. Today it's different. So I have to spend time rebuilding trust with these people, talking with them, to increase assistance. Some other countries have promised the government earlier with assistance, but that's not enough. We have to reach out to the ones like Japan. India had started the process, China had come in, but Japan is needed and the West is needed. Then we have to sit down. We have talked with IMF, push through an agreement soon. There are a large number of countries waiting to go up to the direct board. And at the same time, we have to decide on our debt. What are we going to do? How is the consortium going to work? Because the Chinese criteria is different from that of others. So how do you ensure that all of them share the burden equally, though the systems may be different? This is another issue that we are facing. We have to get all of them together. Who is going to summon the consortium? Where are they going to meet? And how are they going to agree? So we have to speak to all the members to see how we can help to iron out the differences. So this is the situation we are in. To go forward, we need their help. We have to get their help. Then only we can start working out within the country. Otherwise, we will find that gradually the economy is slowly coming to a halt in different sectors. Already the construction industry is coming to a halt. Tourism has fallen by the wayside. Two are major sectors of the economy. Into this, we have to ensure that people at least are fed. Food is available. So we would like to start, we are going to start a food security program of cultivating our own food. And that will have to go on till 2024. Because 2023 also may be a bad year globally. So 2024, we have to go on. And I hope that all of you and others will join in this effort. Within this, we are working an economic stabilization program. I have appointed a council and they will be meeting, stabilize the economy, make the money available and revive the economy and ensure that the real economy starts functioning again. But that is not enough. The next is, how do we recover? What are we going to do? Then we have to find bridging finance till the IMF comes through and others come in. How are we going to recover? That we must decide the principle. Remember, at the end of this exercise of stabilizing, our debt would have gone up higher. The 50 billion would have gone up more. Then every year we will have to keep borrowing. So how are we going to repay it? If we don't repay it, within 3 to 4 years we come back to the same position. That we have to remember. We have to have a new economy. The old one will not answer. We have to earn more money, more dollars. Then we must have export-oriented economy. For the export-oriented economy to function, we must be highly competitive. We have to restructure the economy. We have to make it outward looking. Your business must be able to go out to create markets, new businesses, services, maybe logistics, and expansion of IT or many other sectors. Now you have to come to the next problem. Our professionals are leaving the country. How are you going to fill it? So these are what we are now focusing on. I think all of you should also focus on how do we recover. How do we start earning money? Not merely arriving at a surplus on the primary budget, a surplus overall, and a balance of trade surplus. These are difficult things that we have not achieved before. But I am confident we work together, go in the correct position, we will achieve it. We have to ensure that this is only a short period. We go through this year and part on next year. And we can start recovering, so by 2025, we can get back to having a break-even budget or a primary surplus. Then you bring in a new economy, where all of us have to work. Where we have to be able to earn foreign exchange, to open up the country. The old system has failed. We try to look inwards. We didn't encourage investments that came in. I find a large number of applications for investments stuck somewhere. The departments are not moving. So we have to think anew, bring a new structure, and to do all that, a new mindset. What can you do? Kindly create that new mindset. That is a start. No one knows of the living. Some of the countries ask, all right, before we help you, have you helped yourself? What have you done to raise this money? Now I have to answer that. Without that we can't go. People can get onto the street and demonstrate, we don't want to do this, we don't want doing that. But at the end of the day, if we don't help ourselves, no one else will help us. So we have to get ready to go through a tough time and to change the system. Changing the system and bringing this export-oriented, I don't think is going to help Iran very much. But his sons and his daughters and his grandsons and the granddaughters are going to have a new Sri Lanka. That's what we are working for. A Sri Lanka that is prosperous. Let this experience be our last experience with this bitter politics. Let's think anew. And that comes back to the Constitution. We based ourselves on the British Constitution. The majority has the power, the minority starts talking and shouting, that's all. But then we changed the first past the post. into a PR system. Now you are going to remove the presidency. Then do you want to go back to the English system, the Westminster system, or do you want to have one in which there is more cooperation, like the old Donamo system, the state council system? This is one issue that everyone has to think of. I've given some proposals which make the parliament work together, but that's only the beginning. So think of it and remember that this is the beginning of a new journey. Think anew and start traveling anew. Thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, while you gave us a full reality check there, you also ended on a very optimistic, positive note. In the middle of all that, you did say that we have to be ready for tough times. How tough are we talking about here?
It can be very tough. It may mean that more people are unemployed. It may mean that there's a shortage of food, shortage of medicine. And remember, as the economy falls, people who have been up in the middle class, you come down, people who have just got out of poverty will go back into poverty. The number of vulnerable people will increase. And what happens then? That is when the real political destabilization begins. Unless the political parties show now that we are willing to work together to take it out. Otherwise, whether you belong to the opposition or the government will be irrelevant. As for the political instability, what you have witnessed now is nothing compared to the political instability. It's not only the political parties, the media will be questioned, anyone they think responsible for this. And we have no alternative system. So it can be pretty bad.
What is taking priority now? Would it be the economic crisis or would it be the political crisis? They are intertwined after all.
It will be multiple crises. You will have political, you have economic, you have social, and other things can grow from it. You can have a health crisis if some pandemic breaks out.
And so we are going to open the questions to the audience. What we have done is actually got some written questions in because that will save us time. Can I ask Sahan Veeratunga? Are you in the audience, Sahan? Sahan, if you can get a mic as you ask the question, can you also just briefly tell us who you are so that the Prime Minister knows and quickly ask your question?
Can't hear you.
So Sahan's question is actually based on inflation, I think, and the cascading impacts it has. Go ahead, Sahan.
Sorry about that. Honorable Prime Minister, my name is Sahan Veeratunga. I'm a recent graduate from University of Colombo. I did sustainable development for my studies. And I'm actually now working in social development sector. So my question to you is actually, there's this bit of argument on what is rising, what is causing to this rising inflation. The governor of central bank says that that has to do with aggregate demand pressure, and the economic research department of central bank says that is actually has to do with supply side effects. In this context, actually, some actions take. Some actions taken by central bank actually negatively impacting the SM sector, such as they have allowed the interest rates of treasury securities to go up at 20%, which in turn will result negatively to SME because they have to pay up that interest rates when they are taking loans. And this will result actually in further unemployment, and several SMEs are facing, they are in the verge of bankruptcy. And what are your thoughts and what are you suggesting that central bank should do at this particular juncture? That is my question to you, sir.
Well, at the moment, there is a controversy about the steps taken by the central bank. They want to control inflation and build up the reserves, but it's also being questioned with the impact, adverse impact. There has to be an adverse impact. Then there is the question of open accounts. Some of the part of the private sector is questioning the decisions taken by the central bank, but it is natural at this time, because when you take a decision like this, some sectors will benefit, others will get adversely impacted. So we are going through that period. But mine is just to watch it and see how it develops. If it is having adverse effects, then we could ask the central bank whether there should be a change in policy. But since central bank has decided this, especially on the monetary field, I don't want to interfere, because there is confidence if you allow the central bank to take decisions independently on monetary policy, but thereafter, if it's not having the desired results, you could always intervene. So that's the policy. Now they've started, let's give it a chance and see how it's going to work.
Sajeevan Imalasiri, an engineering graduate from the University of Warwick. Sajeeva, are you?
Hi, I'm Sajeevi, and I'm an engineering graduate, as you said, from the University of Warwick. All this time, it looks like Sri Lanka was managed by a handful of individuals, and it's apparent that we need a long-term bipartisan economic plan to come out of this current crisis. So, and looking at the history and some of the countries that have defaulted, it seems that it may even take us 10 years to come out of this. So, Honorable Prime Minister, I want to know, in the shortest possible time span, what are your action plans for us to come out of this? Thank you.
Well, I'd like to see the stabilization taking place this year, but for that we also need assistance from outside, including the IMF. We are paying a heavy price for not having gone to the IMF before. But if you can stabilize now, you will find 2023 will also not see high growth, but we must improve our situation since the global growth rate, GDP growth rate, will also be low next year. Then from 2024 we should go ahead. I am trying to look at the possibility of breaking even or even having a surplus of the primary budget by 2025. Now it needs a lot of discipline. All of us have to be disciplined. The systems have to be disciplined. It must also make our businesses very competitive. We do that, then we must open ourselves and go all out. You don't need 10 years from 2025. You go up by the next, from 2025 till mid-century, you must grow and keep growing. And you must have policies that will make you grow. Because by 2048, It will be the centenary of our independence. Where do you want us to be? That decision is yours.
Mr. Prime Minister, just stemming from what she said, what Sajivi said, we are not the first country to have gone through this mess. There are others. Are there any historical lessons that we can glean from some others that are there, that we can maybe take from, a leaf or two?
Well, we didn't learn the historical lessons that if you go this way, you are going to have problems and there will be a crisis. So let's now learn from our own lesson and decide to go forward.
And one question you said that the funding agencies will ask is, what have you done to help yourself?
Yes, we must look at the economy and see what we can do to ensure the economy goes forward. There's room, at least there's a plan for rapid growth. Then what are we doing ourselves to reduce the burden? How are we going to increase our foreign exchange reserves? What is the steps that we have taken? So unless we take the steps, others may not help us fully.
Praveena Raviraj, could you be in the audience? Yes, you are.
Hi. So hello, Prime Minister. Very nice to have heard you speak. And it's as a youth, I feel my shivers, to be honest. But the question I have for you is coming from the side of the political crisis that we're also faced with, which you've also briefly touched upon. So we're speaking about a 21st Amendment, which has taken a lot of spotlight in recent times. But however, when you speak to a large number of audience in the general public, what they feel is, yes, it might address a temporary or a stopgap situation, but when you talk about a holistic, complete solution for a long-term prosperous Sri Lanka, is it the right foot forward, is a kind of dilemma that the general public is faced with. So my question to you is, what are your suggestions to make this 21st Amendment to kind of step up to the global standards in terms of complete democratic values, and also establish that as a benchmark if we ever navigate towards a better constitution or a framework as such, so that it really builds confidence, not just for the public or the people of Sri Lanka, but also in the global and world arena? That's my question. Thank you, sir.
Well, what we are doing with the 21st Amendment is first to get the parties together, government and opposition, so that we can start working on this crisis. I think in my view, the opposition too has to come on board and help us out, and we have to reach out to them. That is essential. Then what is the purpose of the 21st Amendment? It is to go back to the 19th Amendment, the principles of the 19th Amendment, where Parliament supremacy has been established. And why do you want the parliamentary supremacy to be re-established? Because that's the only way. Parliament has control of public finance, and when Parliament lost that supremacy, we saw what a mess that the public finance got into. So Parliament has to control public finance. For that, the Parliament has to be supreme, and we discussed it and we found ways that we could go ahead with some interim provision for this period, but that will establish the supremacy of the Parliament. It will not do away with the executive presidency. If you want to abolish the executive presidency, you will need a referendum. And we are not in a position to hold a referendum at the moment. But it's not only the question of the executive presidency. A bigger question is going to be the system of elections. What the major parties want and the smaller parties want are two different systems. To come to an agreement on that is going to be the difficult issue. Look at the provincial councils, what are the amendments that are needed. But as I said earlier, all this depends on one. What type of a political system do you want? Do you want a confrontational one? Do you want the British where the winners have the power, others stay in the opposition? Or do you have one like in the continent where there is coexistence and collaboration among the parties, making the parliament more important? So I think we have to first got to address that issue before we address the rest of it.
Question answered. So education is another area that there have been lots of discussions on education reform for decades, but very little has got done. Somehow the students seem to be left behind. Our next question is from Digayu Aditya Bandara. Digayu, you're 21 years and an undergraduate at ANC and employed in the digital marketing area. You're also a musician and you know 5 languages, I believe. Where are you? There you are.
Right, thank you. That's quite the information. Mr. Prime Minister, Sri Lanka has 15 state universities and about 30,000 students only out of 350,000 students who totally sit for the A-level exam being admitted annually for those universities. So, Mr. Prime Minister, as you can see, there's a clear, significant gap in students who get the opportunity to pursue higher education in any local university out there. And as a matter of fact, most graduates lack the necessary skill set to face the rapidly evolving modern world and primarily speaking the soft skills. And my question to you, Mr. Prime Minister, is as this is a time people will be amenable to change, how do you plan to reform education policy to encompass the those shortcomings that I've mentioned before, along with the other changes necessary that you have in mind?
Well, I've been speaking with the Minister of Education. There has to be a change in the primary and the secondary system of education. We must be more attuned to the 21st century and the needs of the 4th industrial revolution. For instance, we were working on earlier having an upper secondary vocational stream. That was stopped, so we talked to the minister about reviving it. Then we have to ensure that we improve the standards of training for the teachers and ensure that we have teachers for 35. We have to look at our classes. Our bigger schools are sometimes larger than some of the universities. If you take Royal College, you take DS, you take Anand, I mean, you go into the outstation even, you find now, how can you ensure standards when you run a school of 9,000 people without all the staff that you require? So these are some of the issues. As far as the universities are concerned, a lot of our people are going abroad for education. If there are more universities here giving so many other subjects, certainly then they can stay here. It can also be one that will attract students from abroad. It becomes a source of income. Our students need not suffer because the government can always make available loans on easy terms, soft loans or even grants. Those are systems that we have to work. Now, which university are you?
I'm currently, I'm an undergrad in American National College, which is affiliated with Northwood University in Michigan.
What?
Northwood University in Michigan.
Okay. So what we have to ask from them is, why is it that some of our, one section of our population is against having these universities? No country has fully state universities, but they have non-state universities where the students are funded and they are selected according to a given criteria. So that is the issue that we have to, we face today. Do we want an expanded system of higher education or not? That's the question for the country. That's one question that all of us will have to face in the coming times. And where should the university students be generally? In their classrooms having a good time, lecture halls, or out on the street?
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Are you giving us a song?
Not today.
Mr. Prime Minister, you mentioned 2 vital foreign exchange industries that have actually fallen off the precipice, so to speak, almost: construction industry and tourism. Tourism is an industry where we can get in the dollars, but unfortunately that's not happening, because also we are pitching right at this point of time or throughout COVID and things like that for high volume, sort of low quality tourists. How can we change that? Although we have properties that will cater to the high value tourists, it's not happening.
One thing that is taking place is that the hotels, others engaged in the tourist business, want tourists to come in. And they are willing at the moment to take the low-paying tourists too. Our issue is, will the country be sufficiently stable this year for the embassies to lift the travel advisories? Look at what the future is going to be, that will be a question mark. However much we would like the travel advisories to be lifted. But we have to, I think the tourist trade also has to come up and realize, accept the reality of the situation. Just as much as we'd like tourists to come back, even if they are low paying, that the situation has to improve. And the decision is not with us. The decision is obviously with the embassies. There's very little we can do to convince them if they send a travel advisory out. So that's one, but that's a short-term issue. We have two other issues. A lot of the tourist enterprises are affected, and we most probably come into the NPL category in the banks once the moratorium is lifted. How do we help them out? Third is that a large number of the skilled staff, tourism, are going abroad or planning to go abroad. In this situation, they can earn dollars. Why should they stay here to stand in a queue? You have to understand that. Then how are you going to fill that gap? So these are issues that we have to address. Then how many tourists are we going to get into Sri Lanka? I think we have got enough of low-paying tourists. The next million we must aim for should be high-paying. Some stage we have to make this change. Some are reluctant to make it. But I don't think we have any other option but to go for high-paying tourists and to keep increasing the number of high-paying tourists as you go along. I am not saying to get rid of those who are the low-paying tourists who come, but we can accommodate. One is, do you want 15 million tourists to come to the country every year? Or are you going to be satisfied with 5 or 6 million, many of whom will be high-paying tourists? So those are issues that the industry and the country has to grapple with and find answers very quickly.
So the F&B sector is an offshoot of the hospitality industry, as in restaurants, cafes, that kind of thing. And they're finding it difficult because of the lack of imports. Would they be given some kind of, a way out where they can actually start producing and catering to the experience of a good F&B in Sri Lanka?
Well, actually, at the moment, the type of tourists you get may not require that. The problem is there are going to be a shortage of food per se. Then you have to allow them to import if there are tourists coming in. Some of them assure me that even in the upmarket hotels, most of the tourists like to take Sri Lankan food, especially the seafood, so they could manage without the food. But I think the issue will come if they can't have the liquor.
Okay, so our next question is a lead off from that about food crisis that you mentioned. Minoli Ranasinghe? Minoli? Minoli has a bachelor's in artificial intelligence and an MSc in project management. She's the head of investor relations at Meewalla Holdings. Minoli.
Yeah, good evening, Honorable Prime Minister. First of all, I would like to thank you for truly addressing and explaining to us the real situation in Sri Lanka. And in the context of your speech as well, of the current global and local food crisis, which is amplifying the burdens on Sri Lankans, can you share how you plan to address the food crisis on short term? And also, what are your long-term plans to establish food security for our nation?
Short term is we have to find fertilizer and we have to find diesel. If you have fertilizer and diesel, then you can go and have a successful Maha cultivation season. So that is the first issue. there are crops that you can grow without fertilizer. We are going in for that. The agriculture ministry is identifying the areas, and they have to set up food security committees, district and divisional level, but it must be a planned process. You just can't have excess food that cannot be distributed. So they will have to get the district agricultural personnel and others, the supply chain, to plan it out. Then we are having an issue in the western province. These are cities, you have no access to food. We'll have to bring some from out, but to reduce the pressure, we will be doing a lot of cultivation in the empty plots, and certainly in your gardens and maybe in the balconies, so that there will be enough food to go around. If we can create a surplus, then those we will be able to give some of the food at a very, very concessional price to the vulnerable groups.
Mr. Prime Minister, state-owned enterprises, a majority of them are loss-making. What are your plans to actually recoup some of that and maybe make them profitable, or do we sell them off?
Well, we have to see whether they can be viable and be profitable. If not, the COP will have to look into it and give us the decisions.
So, Mr. H.K. Sudanta? He's a law, there he is, attorney at law, chartered engineer, and a DGM of the CEB. And I think this question also stems off from my earlier question.
Since I am representing power sector by profession, power sector engineer, I do concentrate my question to the power sector. As anyone would understand, energy is also a most important driver of sustainability for the economy, similar to food for the life. Solar penetration is the biggest impact area in the power sector as we experience. Huge amount of fossil fuels extracts through CPC created huge gap fuel bill by CEB to Ceylon Petroleum Corporation. Solar energy penetration to the system, which can reduce dollar drain, is mainly depend on the CB grid network development. Ongoing projects which has biggest impact to solar penetration are at standstill due to ADB loan reschedule process. This will be the high time that Electricity Board and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation to reform, streamline, optimize, cost-effective and make cash profit-oriented entities. Sir, will you expose your thoughts on how this Ceylon Electricity Board and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation operates with the reform and autonomy as a solution rather than continuing as a burden of foreign exchange and crisis to the economy? Thank you, sir.
That's a loaded question. Firstly, renewable energy has a lot of potential. But I think within the CEB, there are disagreement. It's not only the ADB loan that is holding things up. When private investors have come in, they haven't found any response from the CEB. So within the CEB, they have to decide what they are going to do. Any case, we have decided to bring in a new energy supply committee law. So the final decision, all the energy matters, will lie with the committee which will report to Parliament. There's no other way to resolve these issues. The second is how do you make it how do you make it profitable? Remember, the CPC and LIOC gets the fuel at the same price. When it's landed in Colombo, they have paid the same price. But at the end of the day, LIOC has made a profit and CPC is running at a loss. Part of it is because we fix the prices. But if we make it realistic, even then we will still lose money. So you have to look at the CPC as how are you going to make it a profit, a good profitable institution. Where are you going to get the liquidity? Where are you going to get the capital? Now, I am one of the most unpopular people at the CPC because I brought the LIOC in. Now, if we didn't have the LIOC, what would have happened? If we didn't have, if we had gone ahead and allowed those tanks in Trincomalee to be repaired, today we would have been storing fuel. Now, who is to answer for that? Who is to answer for that? The country must ask. Who in the CPC has to answer for that? That you all are today without petrol. If we had that somehow, we could have persuaded the LIUC and got it up. So these are issues that we have to face. You know, even the CEB, a lot of losses taking internally. Now we brought in, we unbundled it in 2003, and that should have worked. But then internally the CEB didn't want it. So we went back to another model, and what has happened after that? After that new law, we have not been able to get a single power station going. If we had that in 1977, Mahaveli would not have taken place. Yeah. Fortunately, we didn't. So what did we do? We had Kotmale, we had Victoria, we had Randenigala, we had Rantambe, we had Maduroya, Uluhitiya, then we had Samanalawava, Lunugangvihera. Under that law, we couldn't have done any of those. So we have to look at it. Why is it that under the new law we couldn't do it, which was drafted by the Electricity Ministry? But if we had unbundled, there would have been competition amongst yourselves, not to privatize, unbundled. That didn't take place. So these are issues that have to be asked today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Mr. Prime Minister, is there a plan to expand alternative energy for Sri Lanka and actually remove ourselves from the dependence we have on fossil fuels?
No, we require fossil fuels because renewable energy also has a risk that it may not be available all the time. The real argument is the percentage. How much of renewables to how much of fossil fuel. So that's an argument that's going on. Another view is we'll have renewables, they come at their risk. And if there's no, in the meantime that we will run our fossil fuel also. So there are different arguments on, these have to be resolved.
Dr. Venura Singarachi? Dr. Venura?
Good evening, sir. I'm Dr. Venura Singarachi, a medical professional. Most of the career was dedicated for public health. And it is my duty to wish you our sincere blessings as medical professionals who have been participating with me in this forum for your new assignment as the Prime Minister of this country at this dying hour of economic and political disaster. Sir, since I have been a medical professional who had been worked with a lot of politicians for last 20 years at all levels, I thought of asking a different type of a question, not on my profession. As you know, sir, in this country, in the parliament, there are 225 lawmakers. So, in the national budget, you allocate for the existence and for the continuation of their service, all the human resource, other paraphernalias, vehicles, transportation, diesel, and everything, right? At the same time, to elaborate on the secondary and tertiary level of lawmakers in the country, we are having 9 provincial councils. So there are 455 lawmakers. Other than that, we are having 24 municipal councils in the country. There are 836 lawmakers in these councils. And there are 41 UCs in this country. There we have 417 lawmakers. So there are 276 divisional councils. So we have 1,253 lawmakers. So altogether, at primary level we have 225, secondary and tertiary level we have 350 councils with altogether 5,950 lawmakers for this country. As you know, sir, this country has only 14,000 plus GN divisions. So when you divided the number of GN divisions by the lawmakers, you are having a lawmaker for each 2 GN divisions in this country. So see as I am aware, even in 2017, when the delimitation commission was introduced, these vital statistics were not considered, even at the parliament level, even at the commission level. Do you think, sir, is there a need to revisit this and to restructure of this type of huge national burden for these type of, disproportionate and very, very unacceptable system which the people are requesting in this country? Thank you.
Well, actually, we have to re-look at different elective bodies to ensure there are views that we should expand it. In some countries, there are parish councils. We haven't got the equivalent of a parish council. That's a council for every Grama Sevaka edition. Others feel that the number should be smaller. But why are you asking this question? Because you feel the elected representatives are doing nothing. And they are a set of rogues. Right? Who elected them?
That's the thing.
First question is, why do you elect them? I am asking a question. I'll ask you. Last parliamentary election, I said we require $7 billion. We had to go to the IMF. And I was thrown out of parliament.
No,
so obviously there's something wrong with the voters also. Not only with the MPs.
Sir, it is, I think, even the main parties of this country does not abide by any protocol when they appoint their nominees for the representation of the party to the parliament, either to the parliament or to the provincial council or anything. So all the mutts and all the thugs are representing those parties. So people are bound to vote to their party, their preference. So I think the system itself has created the curse to the country.
Can Mr. Vajirabhayardena stand up? Can Mr. Sagala Ratnayaka stand up? Can Mr. Akila Karivasam stand up? Are these thugs or rogues? But you didn't elect them. And you elected the thugs and the rogues. So something is wrong not only with the politician, but also with the voter.
Thank you, sir. That is true, because the choice of the people and the taste of the people has been gone down. And there are a lot of things to be revisited. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Prime Minister, on that note, just want to ask you, there was a minimum representation quota brought in for gender. Is that being pursued, and how does it work at party level, and how will it translate into the actual big governance picture?
party level, you have to, parties have to decide their candidates. And we've ensured 25% there. I think Provincial Council also require 25%. How are they to be selected? There have been some very good selections made to the local authorities. But there have also been some bad selections. So some have put family members in, while others have selected the best. But increasing women's representation is good. I hope to see more in Parliament. I must say that one of those who've been campaigning a lot for women's representation has now entered Parliament from the JVP. But nevertheless, Harini has done proven that what they can do. There are other good people, Talatatu Korala, Sudarshani, Fernando Pulle, large number in Parliament, Rohini Vijayaratna. There are a lot of good ladies in the Port Tour side who are making a contribution. But we have to ensure that the women's representation, the improvement in quality, and that at the provincial council level too, there should be 25% quota. The issue of whether there should be a quota in Parliament is a difficult one, because some countries do insist on quota. If you are in a list system, it may be easier. If you are in a constituency system, it is much more difficult. But some parties have allowed the women to come up through the party organizations to become MPs. The system we have now really works against youth and women. That is the preference system. If it's a list system, as I said earlier, it can be work for them. But a preference system is you're spending a lot of money to elect the members, and you're giving them 3 choices, but actually only vote for one to get him. The other 2 are wasted votes.
Right, so we have architect Kumudu Munasinghe. Kumudu, are you there? And it's one of the question actually is directed about the construction industry, which you mentioned.
Yeah, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm Kumudu Munasinghe. I'm representing the construction industry, which has a contribution of nearly 10% of the GDP. And now we are in the severe downfall with this economic crisis, and we almost landed in the ground zero now. And this affects the families of the personnel of 1.2 million people, directly and indirectly associated with the construction industry, as well as it's include the engineers, architects, and the tradesmen, and the much in the supporting industry as well. Now with the new economic, the establishing a new economic system, are there any green light or any silver lines coming in recently or in the near future for people to start thinking more positively on construction industry?
No lights, it's only a blackout. Firstly, the private economy is not functioning, so the construction has come to an end. Secondly is that we are diverting all the money to give welfare, provide welfare for a lot of vulnerable people. So the government construction comes in. But there is this big issue of nearly little less than 1 million people who are involved in the industry, and how we can. But this year is going to be tough. From next year onwards there will be. But gradually the role of construction in the economy will come down, because from about 2009 onwards we focused on the construction sector to keep it going. But I think now basically the emphasis will switch on to the export sectors.
So our final question for the evening is from Tusira Malavatantri, who is an attorney at law and former Director General of the Rupani Corporation and Vice President of the Asia Pacific Institute of Broadcasting Development. Tusira?
Good evening, sir. My question is, as we all know, the country has defaulted on its external debt. And however, public opinion is building up whether the due process has been followed for declaring debt default, preempting the process prescribed by the Constitution. Mr. Prime Minister, can we kindly know your thoughts on this, please?
Well, the Parliament is in charge of public finance, but there is no procedural aid, and this was done in a hurry. So what should have done? Most you could have done was for the minister to have come and announced that we are going to, that we'll be bankrupt. But minister told me that it took him there only such a short time space available that he had to announce it quickly, and that's how it came about. But we should in the future, when you are looking at the legislation, we want to draft new legislation where the Parliament should be informed. The problem is you can't blame the minister, because it's only when he opened the box that he realized how bad the situation was. So he himself had to grapple with it, and the whole issue was thrown at him. So, and I don't think he had very many options. Put in that situation, I wouldn't have even informed Parliament, because it takes a day or two to summon Parliament. He didn't have that time frame.
Thank you, sir.
So, Mr. Prime Minister, in summary, if you were to look at the three priority areas in tackling these twin crises of economic and political, what would they be?
Hope and faith. Think anew.
Brilliant. So hope, faith, and think anew, but be prepared for hard times. It's not going to be easy. The Prime Minister says we can somewhat get back on our feet by 2024, 5? Okay, we get back on our feet, while there is the other trend of thought that it will take that much longer. But however, there are roots that have been now planted. There's the food security program, there's the economic stabilization program, and there's various international relations being mooted right now, retracing our international friends to make sure that we get back on track and we manage to get those billions of dollars that we are looking for. So thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Please, if you'd like to step down, I will then get our vote of thanks speaking.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to invite Tikshana Abhivardhana from the Association of Constructive Professionals.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this warm and graceful event in a very positive note, and it gives me immense pleasure in delivering the vote of thanks to our great, graceful guest of honor, Honorable Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, for his insightful speech and thought-provoking answer to questions raised by the audience. As it is evident from the audience, it is beyond doubt that the pragmatic public opinion and the necessary backing to the place, the right people at the right places, are perceived as the key to eventually bring the results we so look forward to. Last but not least, I thank you all for who have attended from near and far, towns from all corners of the country, to bear witness and participate in the event, benefit from first-hand experience of knowing perhaps how the future course of this country will be charted. May all of you return to your loved ones safely, and wish you all the best while hoping this crisis can be put behind us the shortest possible time with the least distress. Ladies and gentlemen, I kindly request you to join us for dinner. Thank you.
Thank you, Tikshana. So like he said, reiterating, please join everyone for dinner.